Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is Wednesday, March 11th, 2026.
And today is a pivotal, genuinely game-changing moment in global geopolitics. What began as a targeted decapitation strike in the Middle East has, well, it's rapidly metastasized into a sprawling conflict threatening to permanently fracture the global economy, rewrite the world order, and frankly, drag the globe into the early stages of World War III.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You, our listener, have sent over an absolute mountain of intelligence reports, raw battlefield assessments, highly sensitive diplomatic readouts, and global economic data this week regarding the extreme escalation in the Middle East.
Yeah, staggering amount of data.
It really is. We've spent the last few days locked in, stripping away the spin from these materials, and what we found is, well, it's staggering. Our mission for this deep dive is to parse through all of this real-time data. We are looking at a U.S.-Israeli war with Iran that is now entering its 12th day, and the global ripple effects are already being felt in your grocery store, at your gas pump, and in the highest halls of international power.
Exactly, and our objective here is to bypass the spin completely. We are going to synthesize the conflicting viewpoints from all sides of this conflict and uncover the hidden truths about the trajectory of this war.
Which requires looking at the data coldly.
Very coldly. Analytically mapping out the strategic blunders, the unexpected retaliations, and the devastating economic warfare playing out in real time.
Now, before we unpack this, it is crucial to state unequivocally that the Hot News Channel takes no political sides. We are impartially reporting the data, the direct statements, and the intelligence gathered from the original material you provided.
We're just looking at the facts.
Exactly. We will be analyzing both left-wing and right-wing perspectives today without endorsing the viewpoints of the content. Our goal is simply to convey the facts and ideas contained in the original intelligence so you can understand exactly what is happening on the ground without the filter of partisan narrative.
So let's start with the grim reality of the information war, and specifically the tragedy that has dominated the international discourse over the past 48 hours.
Right. The Minab strike. We need to lay out the cold, hard data regarding the strike in Minab, a city located in southern Iran. This event is a crucial inflection point that has set the tone for the entire current phase of this conflict.
It really is the anchor point for the escalation we're seeing.
The target area included a school which happened to be located near an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, naval base. It was hit in what the military refers to as a double tap strike.
Which is an incredibly brutal tactic.
For those who might not know, a double tap is highly controversial. You strike a target, you wait a specific interval of time for the first responders, the medics, and the rescue workers to rush into the rubble to save the survivors, and then you bomb that exact same spot a second time.
It's designed to maximize casualties among emergency personnel.
And the verified death toll from this specific strike currently stands at 165 to 175 people, predominantly young girls aged 7 to 12.
The immediate fallout from this is just catastrophic, both in terms of this staggering loss of human life and the disastrous strategic optics for the coalition. According to the analysis by Scott Ritter, this strike involved a sequence of 5 missiles.
5 total.
Yeah, 5. But it's the final missile in that sequence that demands our intense attention. Ritter's analysis indicates this was a thermobaric or incendiary weapon.
And to understand the sheer horror of this, you really have to understand the mechanics of the weapon itself.
You do. A thermobaric munition doesn't just explode with shrapnel like a conventional bomb. It detonates in 2 stages. First, it disperses a highly flammable aerosol cloud of fuel into the air. And that cloud seeps into buildings, basements, and lungs.
It gets everywhere.
Exactly. And a fraction of a second later, a second charge ignites that cloud, creating a massive fireball and a devastating vacuum effect that literally sucks the oxygen out of the surrounding area.
It ruptures the internal organs of anyone within the blast radius.
Right. When you apply that level of indiscriminate, total destructive capability to a civilian structure like a school full of children, the results are unimaginably horrific.
And the narrative ping-pong that followed this event from the administration has been absolutely dizzying. Here's where the raw data gets really interesting. We have President Donald Trump's initial statements made aboard Air Force One shortly after the news broke.
He came out swinging.
He did. He aggressively claimed that the strike was, quote, done by Iran. He explicitly cited their inaccurate munitions as the cause of the school's destruction, suggesting a catastrophic misfire by the IRGC.
But the White House press corps, armed with real-time open-source intelligence, pushed back intensely on that.
Specifically, a New York Times reporter directly challenged the president on camera, pointing out that the weapon used in the strike was definitively identified by weapons experts as a Tomahawk cruise missile.
Which completely and utterly unravels the initial narrative. I mean, you simply cannot claim an enemy bombed their own civilian infrastructure with highly advanced weapons they do not possess.
Exactly. Let's look at the technical data on Tomahawks for a second to really cement why that claim fell apart so incredibly fast.
Yes, sir.
The Tomahawk is an incredibly sophisticated subsonic cruise missile. They are manufactured by RTX, which was formerly Raytheon out in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right.
They cost roughly $2 million a pop, and they use a combination of GPS and terrain contour matching to hit targets with pinpoint accuracy. The United States tightly controls the export of these weapons. We exclusively sell these specific munitions to exactly 4 allied nations.
The UK, Australia, Japan, and the Netherlands.
Exactly. And none of those nations are actively launching strikes in this specific theater of the conflict right now. And Iran absolutely, categorically does not have American-made Tomahawk cruise missiles in their arsenal.
The cognitive dissonance here is staggering. You have the commander-in-chief attempting to deflect blame using a narrative that basic open-source intelligence easily disproves within minutes.
And it was visible right there on the plane.
It was. What's fascinating here is the visible, real-time fracture within the administration's own messaging apparatus. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was standing right there next to the president, noticeably refused to back Trump's claim about it being an Iranian missile.
Hegseth knows military hardware.
He does. He simply stated that they were still investigating. He knew the technical reality of the Tomahawk debris being shared by intelligence analysts. When pressed repeatedly by the press corps on why he was the only one in the entire government making this specific claim, Trump eventually had to walk it back.
He took a very defensive posture.
He stated, "Whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report."
So once the origin of the missile became undeniable and the misfire narrative collapsed, what does this all mean for the administration's justification of the strike? Because we immediately saw the narrative aggressively shift from denial to justification.
We did. We saw statements from Representative Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth pivoting to the argument that Iran deliberately hides military apparatus near civilian infrastructure.
The classic human shields argument.
It's a very familiar playbook in modern asymmetric warfare, but we have to subject it to rigorous critical thinking. We have to challenge this with counter-analysis because the implications are profound.
Yeah.
According to the analysis by Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal, this was not a tactical misstep or a tragic accident. They categorize it as an unprovoked massacre.
They point to a recent deliberate removal of certain constraints on targeting protocols.
Exactly. Protocols that Hegseth himself had previously championed removing to give commanders more lethal flexibility. Furthermore, to truly stress test the human shield justification that Waltz and Hegseth are using, we have to look in the mirror.
This is where it gets incredibly complicated for the Pentagon's PR team.
There is a counter-argument gaining heavy traction in the intelligence community right now. There are over 160 United States public schools located directly on U.S. military bases, providing education for military-connected children.
Places like Fort Liberty or Camp Pendleton.
Right. They have elementary schools just down the road from massive munitions depots and command centers.
Wow. That drastically complicates the administration's justification. I mean, think about it. If a foreign adversary struck Fort Liberty, took out a command center, and leveled an elementary school in the process, would the American public accept the justification that the U.S. military was using its own children as human shields?
Absolutely not. The public would demand total war.
From a strict, cold military definition of proximity targeting, the IRGC naval base in Minab was a legitimate high-value target. But the proximity of the school and the decision to proceed with a double-tap thermobaric strike anyway raises massive red flags about the current rules of engagement.
And this is exactly where the systemic oversight completely breaks down. The strict military definition of proximity targeting is always supposed to be balanced by civilian mitigation protocols.
The teams of lawyers and analysts.
Yes. Their sole job is to calculate potential collateral damage and abort strikes if the civilian cost is too high. I want to push back hard on the utter failure of those exact protocols here.
Let's bring in some outside analysis on that.
According to the analysis by CPP Matt Ho, a former Marine Corps officer and State Department official, this is a textbook example of how initial lies about civilian casualties push nations toward protracted, unwinnable wars.
He draws a direct line to Iraq and Afghanistan.
A chilling line. He compares the false narrative spun during the early days of those invasions to what we are seeing unfold today, when a government cannot even agree on its own narrative regarding the deaths of over 150 children. The strategic foundation of the entire war effort is already cracking under the weight of its own contradictions.
And while the information war rages in press conferences in Washington, let's shift to the brutal, undeniable reality on the ground in the Middle East. Because the target deck in this conflict has fundamentally expanded beyond infrastructure and military bases.
It's a completely different war now.
We are now seeing high-level decapitation strikes. On February 28th, the 86-year-old supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was assassinated in a targeted strike.
That is a seismic event.
It is. The new supreme leader is his son, Mujtaba Khamenei. And here is a deeply personal detail from the intelligence that completely alters the psychological landscape of this entire conflict. Mujtaba Khamenei has lost his wife, his mother, his sister, and his son in these recent coalition strikes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the geopolitical implications are genuinely terrifying. You are no longer dealing with a rational state actor calmly calculating geopolitical leverage from a distance.
Right. It's not a chess match anymore.
You are dealing with a leader who has suffered absolute, total personal devastation. According to the analysis by Mohammad Marandi and Scott Ritter, the gloves are off.
Completely off.
Iran has definitively transitioned from a posture of measured, managed escalation, which we saw in previous limited exchanges over the last few years, to a bare-knuckle, unrestrained war of attrition.
They aren't trying to just send a message anymore.
No. They are prepared to absorb immense, crippling damage because they fundamentally believe they can outlast the political will of the West.
We are already seeing that bare-knuckle approach in the incoming Iranian retaliation. The raw data on this is unprecedented in its scale and success. They recently executed a massive ballistic missile strike on the Rabin power station in Israel.
That's a critical infrastructure node.
To give you the hard data on why that specific target matters so much, that single power station generates 25,590 megawatts of electricity. That is roughly 19% of Israel's total electricity capacity.
Nearly a fifth of the grid.
Taking that offline instantly isn't just a flicker of the lights. When a grid loses nearly a fifth of its generation capacity in a millisecond, it leads to massive frequency drops, cascading infrastructure failures, and rolling blackouts across the central Israeli grid.
It's a deliberate, strategic dismantling of civilian infrastructure, directly mirroring what was done to them. But it goes much deeper into the high-value target matrix.
Let's talk about the political targets.
There is widely circulated, though currently unconfirmed, intelligence suggesting Iranian missiles have directly struck the private residence of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
And allegedly killing his brother in the process.
That's the intelligence chatter, yes. Furthermore, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir was reportedly severely wounded in a separate strike, and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's son was wounded near the Lebanese border.
We are talking about the top tier of Israeli political leadership being directly, physically impacted.
The domestic Israeli response to this level of penetration has been staggering.
According to the border data and intelligence reports we are reviewing, upwards of 250,000 Israelis have already fled the country. Airports are chaotic, and the psychological toll is immense. Yet the state-run media is claiming a total of only 13 casualties nationwide from all these incoming barrages.
13 casualties against rolling blackouts and 250,000 people fleeing. The math doesn't work.
The on-the-ground intelligence we are seeing paints a vastly, almost absurdly different picture.
This raises an incredibly important question about censorship and the control of reality during wartime. We are witnessing an extreme media blackout inside the country.
The suppression efforts are intense.
There are highly credible reports of IDF soldiers physically removing CCTV cameras from city streets, and police are actively detaining ordinary citizens who upload smartphone recordings of missile impacts to social media.
Why go to such extreme lengths to hide the impacts?
Because the visual evidence contradicts the invincible aura of the Iron Dome and the David Sling air defense systems. Connect this to the analysis by Professor Ted Postal, a leading MIT expert on missile defense systems.
Postal's work on this is fascinating.
Professor Postal argues that Iranian ballistic missiles are, in fact, successfully penetrating the Iron Dome with alarming frequency. The sheer volume of the barrages, combined with advanced maneuvering capabilities, we're talking about hypersonic glide vehicles and maneuverable re-entry vehicles that change trajectory in the final seconds of flight, are completely overwhelming the interceptors.
The math of the interception rate is breaking down.
It is. This proves that Iran's intelligence gathering and strike execution capabilities are far, far superior to what Western military planners previously estimated.
The illusion of total airspace control is shattering right before our eyes. And while the physical infrastructure burns in the Middle East, the global economic engine is actively freezing up. Let's look at the economic choke point segment of our data because the global dashboard is flashing bright red. It's a full-blown crisis. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Oman and Iran, is functionally closed to Western shipping. That means 20 million barrels of oil per day are simply missing from the global market.
That's an apocalyptic number for global logistics. To put 20 million barrels a day into perspective, that's roughly 20% of the world's total global oil consumption simply vanishing overnight.
The immediate market reaction has been violent. Oil has spiked to between $115 and $120 a barrel. If you live in Los Angeles, you're seeing gas prices peaking above $8 a gallon. In New Jersey, prices jumped from $2.99 to $3.45 in a matter of weeks, with station owners warning it will breach $4 very soon.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
It really is.
According to the analysis by Professor Kenneth Rogoff, make no mistake, this is pure, unadulterated economic warfare, and it is highly effective. But we have to explain why this extends far beyond the price of gas at your local pump.
The secondary effects are massive. Let's talk about LNG.
The global implications affect liquid natural gas. Countries like Qatar export massive amounts of LNG through that strait. When you freeze that gas, put it on a specialized ship and send it to Europe or Asia, it powers entire nations' electrical grids.
Without it, factories literally shut down.
Furthermore, it heavily impacts the export of urea.
Let's break down the urea aspect because this connects directly to the food supply.
Urea requires the Haber-Bosch process, which is heavily reliant on natural gas, and it is the foundational element for global agricultural fertilizer. We are right at the start of the Northern Hemisphere's planting season. If farmers don't get fertilizer, crop yields plummet, leading to global food shortages.
And critically, this blockade chokes off the supply of sulfur. Sulfur is a byproduct of petroleum refining that is an absolutely vital component in the manufacturing of sulfuric acid.
Which is used to etch semiconductor wafers.
Exactly. No sulfur means no microchips. No microchips means no new cars, no new computers, no modern electronics. You are looking at a cascading failure of global trade, from the food supply to the tech sector.
So how exactly is Iran achieving this massive blockade? We have seen U.S. intelligence reports, amplified heavily by major networks, suggesting that Iran is actively dropping thousands of naval mines into the Strait of Hormuz.
I have to strongly push back on that narrative based on the tactical reality of the region we're seeing in the intelligence readouts.
It doesn't align with their actual strategy.
According to the analysis by Larry Johnson and Max Blumenthal, the mining narrative simply doesn't add up. Iran does possess an estimated 2,000 to 5,000 highly sophisticated mobile naval mines, but they don't need to use them.
Dropping mines is a blunt, indiscriminate tactic that would invariably hurt their own allies' shipping.
Exactly. Their vast arsenal of attack drones, fast attack speedboats, and land-based anti-ship cruise missiles hidden in the mountainous coastline is more than sufficient to enforce a total blockade.
What they are doing is far more cunning and strategic.
They are selectively allowing Chinese or Russian vessels to pass freely through the strait while aggressively targeting Western-aligned shipping. They have created a geopolitical toll booth, weaponizing the strait and controlling the flow of global commerce without having to indiscriminately mine it.
The impact of that toll booth on the neighboring Gulf states is devastating. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain are in deep crisis.
We have reports that Bahrain and Qatar have actually declared force majeure.
Which is huge. For those unfamiliar with contract law, force majeure is a legal clause that frees both parties from liability or obligation when an extraordinary event or circumstance beyond their control prevents one or both parties from fulfilling their obligations.
It's essentially throwing up your hands and saying to the global market, we legally cannot deliver the gas we sold you because it's an active war zone.
Even crazier, Saudi Aramco's physical oil storage capacity is nearly 100% full because the tankers simply can't get out of the Persian Gulf to empty the reserves.
Plumbing is backed up.
Because they have nowhere to put the oil, they're being forced into a total shutdown of active production wells. It's an economic heart attack for the entire region.
And how does the U.S. administration respond to this? President Trump recently addressed the massive oil spike by publicly claiming the war is, quote, almost complete. He referred to the largest military conflict of the decade as short-term excursion.
That rhetoric actually caused a temporary artificial drop in the oil price back down to the $85 to $92 range because trading algorithms reacted to the headline.
But we have to debate the reality behind those words. Is this a desperate, calculated attempt to manipulate the financial markets with rhetoric to prevent a total stock market collapse?
Or is it a genuine signal of an impending military retreat because the Pentagon realizes the war is economically unwinnable?
To answer that, we have to look past the political rhetoric to the hidden casualties and the severe military strain happening out of the public eye. Let's compare the narratives. The Pentagon's official public count claims only 8 U.S. troops have been wounded in this entire conflict.
However, a leaked Reuters report explicitly confirms that at least 150 U.S. troops have been wounded so far from various drone and missile attacks on regional bases.
And we can actually corroborate that leaked report with highly granular logistical intelligence coming out of Europe.
According to the analysis by Larry Johnson, there are undeniable logistical footprints of mass casualties that you simply cannot hide. He points to the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany.
For context, Landstuhl is the primary massive medical hub for U.S. combat casualties being aeromedically evacuated out of the Middle East via Ramstein Air Base.
On March 4th, Landstuhl abruptly suspended all routine OB/GYN services for military families stationed in the area. Why would they do that?
To free up operating rooms.
Exactly. Beds, surgical staff, to handle a massive, unpublicized influx of combat trauma patients. Simultaneously, the nearby Kaiserslautern military community issued urgent, base-wide appeals for emergency blood donors.
You do not suspend childbirth services and beg thousands of airmen for blood because 8 soldiers got hurt.
You just don't. The logistical footprint proves the administration is concealing the true human cost from the American public.
And despite these hidden casualties and the massive strain on medical logistics, there is heavy chatter in the intelligence channels that Trump is allegedly considering escalating the conflict even further by putting boots on the ground.
One specific scenario being floated by hawkish advisors is a marine amphibious assault to take over Karg Island.
Karg Island is crucial. It's a small island in the Persian Gulf that contains the Sea Island Terminal, which is responsible for refining and exporting the vast majority of Iran's oil. Taking it would theoretically cripple their economy instantly.
But according to the analysis by Carl Douglas McGregor and Carl Larry Wilkerson, an amphibious assault on Karg Island would be a catastrophic, practically suicidal mission.
Let's look at the sheer geography of this idea.
Karg Island is located barely 16 miles off the Iranian coast. That puts it squarely within point-blank range of Iran's highly mobile, land-based coastal artillery, massive swarms of suicide drones, and advanced anti-ship missile batteries like the Silkworm.
American troops trying to establish a beachhead and the naval vessels supporting them would be sitting ducks in a narrow body of water.
The American public has absolutely no appetite for the level of body bags that a D-Day-style operation in the Persian Gulf would generate.
But the administration is aggressively pushing back on the idea that they are failing or stuck. General Jack Keane has gone on the record on several networks, citing statistics about the U.S. military successfully destroying thousands of Iranian targets.
He points to this massive destruction as proof of a definitive tactical U.S. advantage, arguing we are systematically dismantling their infrastructure and degrading their capability to fight.
I really have to push back on Keene's logic there, because counting destroyed buildings is a massive strategic trap.
It's the exact same statistical failure the U.S. military fell into during the Vietnam War with General William Westmoreland's infamous body counts.
Right. The Military Assistance Command Vietnam constantly claimed we were winning because we were killing more Viet Cong than we were losing.
But according to the analysis we've seen on modern asymmetric warfare, blowing up empty warehouses, abandoned missile silos, and concrete radar stations does not equate to strategic victory.
Because the enemy's strategy isn't to protect those buildings. Their strategy is survival and attrition.
If Iran retains the underlying capability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, spike global oil prices, and penetrate Israeli airspace with mobile hidden launchers, it simply does not matter how many empty concrete bunkers the U.S. Air Force destroys.
In a war of attrition, the entity that can dictate the duration of the conflict and absorb the most economic pain holds the strategic advantage.
And right now, by controlling the toll booth of the global economy, Iran is dictating the timeline.
Which brings us to a moment of apparent diplomatic desperation. The sudden, high-stakes phone call between Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Let's break down the readout of this call because the timeline is critical.
Very critical.
Last night, at exactly 22:30 Moscow time, Trump initiated a 1-hour phone call with Putin. I'm going to pull directly from the official readout released by Putin's foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov, because the phrasing is very deliberate.
The language used by Ushakov is essentially a decoder ring for international diplomacy. He explicitly noted that the conversation between the two leaders was businesslike, frank, and constructive.
To the casual listener, that sounds relatively positive.
But in Kremlin speak, and diplomatic parlance in general, describing a call between heads of state as frank means it was a highly contentious, heated argument where both sides dug their heels in.
It is also vital to understand the historical context Ushakov highlighted in his briefing. The last time these two men spoke was in late December 2025.
Literally right before a Ukrainian drone strike targeted Putin's personal Valdine residence. The trust deficit between Washington and Moscow is absolute.
Yet, despite that massive trust deficit, they are talking. And surprisingly, Putin's readout actually gave a positive assessment of the backdoor mediation efforts currently being undertaken by Trump's team.
Ushakov specifically named Kirill Dmitriev, the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, alongside Jared Kushner and real estate investor Steve Witkoff.
And this is where the geopolitical tectonic plates are truly shifting beneath our feet.
According to the analysis by Alexander Mearsheimer and John Helmer, the mere fact that Trump initiated this call at 10:30 p.m. Moscow time proves he is actively begging for an off-ramp.
He knows the global economic collapse from $120 oil is coming, and it will destroy his domestic political standing.
But what is the trade-off? If Trump wants Putin to leverage Russia's deep relationship with Iran and China to force a regional ceasefire, Putin's price will be astronomical.
We have to analyze the massive geopolitical trade-off sitting on that negotiating table. Is the United States president secretly offering to lift the crippling economic sanctions on Russian oil?
And effectively abandon the entire military funding project in Ukraine, all in exchange for Russia throwing him a diplomatic lifeline in the Middle East.
That would be a total historic realignment of the U.S. global posture. But here is the massive escalation trap they find themselves in. Iran is not playing ball.
They're currently rejecting all of these backdoor ceasefire demands brokered by third parties.
Their new stated position, likely driven by Mojtaba Khamenei's personal losses, is that any return to the status quo must involve Prime Minister Netanyahu facing trial at the International Criminal Court.
That is a complete non-starter for the U.S. and Israel. They will never agree to that.
Which leaves the U.S. military and diplomatic corps completely boxed in.
If you bring in the analysis by Professor John Mearsheimer and Professor Jeffrey Sachs, they articulate the core problem beautifully. Their central argument is that the United States currently lacks what military strategists call escalation dominance in this specific theater.
Escalation dominance is the ability of a power to increase the intensity of a conflict in a way the adversary simply cannot match, forcing them to submit.
In past conflicts, the U.S. could always hit harder than the enemy. But here, if the U.S. escalates and hits Iranian core infrastructure, harder, say, taking out their major cities' power grids, Iran has the proven capability to completely wipe out the remaining highly vulnerable desalination plants, power grids, and oil refineries of the allied Gulf states.
There is no top rung of the escalation ladder the U.S. can safely reach without triggering global economic suicide.
Professor Sachs warns, with deep gravity, that we are teetering on the absolute precipice of World War III.
Ultimately, if these trends hold, we are watching a scenario where the United States might be forced to self-evict from the Middle East entirely, simply because the cost of remaining both in blood and global economic stability has become unendurable.
It's a sobering reality.
So after parsing through all of this dense intelligence, the brutal battlefield data, the hidden medical logistics, and the desperate diplomatic maneuvering, what is the ultimate takeaway here? What does our listener need to understand above all else?
The one critical thing you need to remember for the rest of the week is this. The illusion of a quick, clean, technological war is officially dead.
It's completely shattered.
The conflict in Iran has definitively proven that raw, advanced Western firepower, no matter how many Tomahawks or stealth bombers you possess, cannot overcome strategic geographic leverage. The resulting economic shockwaves, from $120 oil to halted semiconductor production, are actively rewriting the global hierarchy in real time.
Shifting power definitively away from Washington and toward a multipolar reality. I want to leave you with a chilling scenario to mull over as you watch the news this week.
What's the thought?
We discussed Iran's brilliant, if ruthless, toll booth strategy in the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran formalizes a selective toll system for that strait, allowing allied nations like China and Russia to pass their massive oil tankers freely, while permanently locking out Western ships through the constant threat of asymmetric drone strikes, how long can the U.S. dollar remain the world's unquestioned reserve currency?
That is the real danger.
If the petrodollar system requires the free flow of oil to Western markets, and that flow is permanently throttled by a regional power, how long before the global financial system completely fractures?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, and the answer might arrive sooner than any of us are prepared for.
If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. Until we meet again, goodbye.